If you have a web design business and you're looking for a way to pay yourself more or simply take some of the things off your plate that you hate doing so you can have a better work-life balance, this video is for you. My name is Sam Chlebowski and I am one of 3 co-founders at Motion.io. Before starting Motion.io, I helped scale a website design agency named Brighter Vision from about 500 clients to 5,000 clients in a few short years. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I learned along the way about scaling up to help you hire your first employee and start building out a team that's going to allow you to serve more clients and bring in more revenue. So let's get into it. I wanted to talk a little bit about staying small. I find a lot of business owners say, hey, I want it to just be me. I'm okay with having a wait list. I'm okay with having a backlog of clients. And I really don't want to manage anybody or have to do any leadership stuff. Well, there's certainly nothing wrong with staying as a freelancer or solopreneur forever, and you can absolutely build a profitable business that way. I want to share something with you that may cause you to reconsider. So I love to cook. After the sale of Brighter Vision and before I went on to start Motion.io with my 2 other co-founders, there was a time where I was considering opening a food truck. I did a ton of research in how to go about it, but eventually decided against it for 2 big reasons. The first was that I would almost always, without question, have to work weekends. And the second is that food trucks are generally not sustainable with just one truck. But scaling up to serve additional customers is time-consuming, expensive, and risky. Web design businesses, on the other hand, have neither of those 2 disadvantages. You can hire anybody to work remotely from anywhere, and you're not necessarily tied to a set schedule or set hours. Despite their differences, there is one interesting thing that website businesses have in common that I thought was articulated really well in the resources about starting a food truck. What almost all of these guides stated is that scaling up to serve additional demand is a pathway to building a more profitable and sustainable business. For whatever reason, this is not something that I see guides on starting a web design business talk about. The long story short for owners of web design businesses is that while bringing on additional help may mean a little bit more work for you in the short term, long term, it will allow you to have a better work-life balance and more predictable income. So let's get into it. And I want to talk about how to hire your first employee. For starters, I recommend you begin thinking about scaling up and hiring your first employee once you reach about 60 to 70% of your total capacity for new clients. Then I recommend you make your first hire once you reach about 80% of your total capacity. That said, there are several other factors that go into hiring outside of just getting the timing right, and I wanted to talk about that quick. I think it's important to distinguish between task-based work and project-based work because it can be immensely helpful in gaining an initial understanding of who you should hire first. At this point of your business where you're ready to hire your first employee, you may have already handed off some of the task-based work to someone like a contractor or a virtual assistant. Task-based work, I define as work with clearly defined steps that doesn't substantially change from task to task. Examples of task-based work might include writing copy for a web page, completing SEO on a client website, or handling one specific type of client support request. For the purposes of this video, when I talk about hiring, I am talking about project-based work. Project-based work is much more complex work that cannot be defined or documented with a simple checklist. Project-based work requires owning a process from start to finish and iterating throughout. Examples of project-based work include things like launching a new marketing initiative, completing a client website project from beginning to end, or handling all of the client support requests. So how do you decide what role to hire for first? Well, the food truck example I shared previously can help you understand the value of scaling up. There are some other powerful things that web design businesses and food trucks have in common that can actually help you understand what role specifically you need to be hiring for. In the same way one location or truck is the bottleneck to growth in a food truck business, one designer is the bottleneck to growth in a web design business. The second thing web design businesses and food trucks have in common is that the same way owners of food trucks need to hire other cooks so they can focus on marketing, sales, and other larger operational pieces of the business, owners of web design businesses have to step back from designing. Well, these are some interesting analogies. I'll come right out and say it. The first person that you hire full-time for your web design business will almost always, in every case, be an additional designer. As a web design business owner, you need to understand what bottlenecks prevent you from working with more clients, then hire the person to remove that bottleneck. This means that if you're beginning the hiring process for your first full-time employee, once you've reached 80% of your capacity for new clients, the bottleneck is your limited bandwidth providing services for each new additional client. This means that the first person that you hire will almost always be an additional designer. Now, if you hate sales and marketing and were hoping to take anything related to that off your plate with your first hire, this probably sounds like bad news, but let me explain why it's the right decision. If you're struggling to create enough demand for your services, hiring someone for sales and marketing isn't going to solve the problem, at least not initially. As a business owner, if you haven't figured out strategies and channels that will allow you to generate consistent demand, you're setting up anyone you hire to do the same for utter failure. Well, down the road, there will likely come a time where your bandwidth is limited and you need additional sales and marketing support. Your first hire is neither the time nor place. You've grown this business by yourself from the ground up. And the one thing you're likely to ever fully be able to get away from is being the face of your sales and marketing initiatives, at least to some degree. And that means your first hire has to be a designer. Once you are ready to begin the hiring process and you've reached that 80% of demand, my number one tip to make the onboarding of your first employee as easy as possible is to start documenting everything. Documentation is especially important when you're hiring a designer for your business, as there are likely many things that you do within your process of working with clients that have been added or changed over time and won't be obvious to the person that you're hiring. As a business owner, it's your responsibility to set the person you are hiring up for success. And this means having clear documentation for things like the process of onboarding new clients, what emails get sent when within a project, tools that are used during client projects and how to use them, as well as how to respond to common questions that clients often ask. Documenting these things ahead of time will make your life way easier, not only once you bring your full-time hire on, but down the road as they start ramping up and working with more people. Making your first full-time hire is an incredibly exciting time, as it represents a huge milestone within your business and allows you to take that critical step in towards scaling up and building out a business that is bigger than yourself. That said, there are a couple things that you should look out for once your first hire is onboarded. The first and probably most important thing to keep in mind is don't be alarmed by a temporary drop-off in profits. Full-time hires are incredibly valuable, but they also come at a cost. During your first few months after making a hire, anticipate that your monthly profits are likely going to be lower than they were in previous months. To make up for the cost of your newest hire even faster, I recommend reframing things and saying that for everything this person takes off my plate, I have X number of minutes or X number of hours to put an additional focus into new marketing initiatives or doubling down on initiatives that already work well. One of the web design business owners I talked to recently had a story where they were getting all of these client referrals, all of this demand, and they scrambled to hire really quickly. Then, once their full-time hire was brought on, they were so busy that they felt like they didn't have to continue to expand their sales and marketing efforts. This mistake was ultimately pretty devastating, because while they had this big surge of referrals, that quickly died off. And it ended up just a few months down the road, they had to lay off that employee and ultimately close their business. Just a word of caution, don't take your eye off the ball. Make sure you continue to focus on sales and marketing and have a plan for generating enough business so you aren't ever even close to having to miss payroll. The second thing to keep in mind once your first hire is onboarded is make sure you keep a pulse on customer satisfaction. While you may start to scale back some of working directly with clients as you hand that off to another designer, it's critical that you stay in tune with how your clients are feeling and what they are saying. Whether you like it or not, you are the face of your company, and you should establish a process for checking in with your customers, even if you are no longer directly responsible for the day-to-day work on their project. While your customers will appreciate hearing from you, checking in with them is critical to providing quality assurance and addressing pain points within your process. Finally, the last thing that you should keep in mind after your first hire is onboarded is understand you are now a leader and own the role. Leadership might not come naturally to you, and that's okay. It can be scary, and you won't have all of the answers. And it's okay to be honest with your team that you need them as much as they need you sometimes. This is something I wish I knew sooner. And it's also why I want to share my own story about becoming a leader. When I was 27, I stepped into my first big leadership role at Brighter Vision. At this time, we were growing like gangbusters, selling 100, 200, 300 clients a month. and I stepped in to manage our sales, marketing, and customer success teams. What I found incredibly uncomfortable is that most of the people I was managing were older than me, sometimes by as much as 10 or 15 years. Not only did my age cause me to feel like a total imposter in times, but when I took on the role, it was at a time where we were going through some serious changes internally at Brighter Vision, requiring me to be in the room for hiring, but also a few firings, and conduct my first end-of-year reviews with my team members. What I finally learned is that the only way to get better as a leader is through practice. And just because you haven't felt like you nailed it yet doesn't mean you're not going to get there. After some time passed at Brighter Vision, I started to get much more comfortable with not only my age, because I was getting older and we were hiring younger people, but I started to understand how I could empower people to do their best work and help to build an environment that allowed each team member I managed to feel safe, trusted, and confident. But I was only able to do this because of one important thing, which is also my single biggest piece of advice for anyone moving into a leadership role for the first time. And that is, find a mentor. Feeling comfortable and confident in your leadership abilities does take time and experience and doesn't happen overnight, but having someone you can speak with who's done it before, who's launched a business, scaled up, and hired team members, and became a leader, can offer you a lot of great advice to help you feel more confident in not only day-to-day or week-to-week decisions, but help you evolve as a leader as a whole. So that does it. I hope this guide provided you with the knowledge that you need to build out your team and hit that next level of growth. This 3-part series has been awesome to put out, and it was really fun walking through the process of those earliest days where you're scrappy and just getting it going to the later points of your business where you're hitting those exciting new levels of growth and new opportunities and building out a team and a business that's ultimately larger than yourself. If there are any topics you're interested in more in-depth coverage of, I'd love to cover them. Head to our website at motion.io and fill out a contact form, or even send me an email directly at sam@motion.io. Until then, my name is Sam Chlebowski, co-founder of motion.io. Have fun, good luck, and go crush it.